I woke up to the sensation of something cold and metallic gently tapping my forehead. My first thought was that I'd rolled into my camping stove. My second thought was that camping had been a terrible idea. When I opened my eyes, I found myself staring directly into the glowing blue slit of a helmet that definitely did not belong to any park ranger I'd ever seen. The helmet was attached to a figure at least 8 feet tall, wrapped in dark segmented armor that looked like it had been forged from obsidian and starlight. Behind her stood at least a dozen more identical silhouettes, each holding spears that hummed faintly like they were plugged into a power outlet. One of those spears was currently resting against my throat. I blinked. Slowly, calmly. "This is either a dream," I muttered, "or I'm never making fun of UFO documentaries again." The tallest one leaned closer. The blue slit in her helmet narrowed as if focusing. She spoke, and her voice rolled out deep and layered, like 3 voices harmonizing through a subwoofer. "Behold, the rare lone male of the sky." I sat up very carefully, raising my hands. "Okay, I can explain. I am not rare. I am extremely average." The spear pressed a little closer. From somewhere above us, a small floating device descended with a soft mechanical hum. It looked like a metallic halo crossed with a drone, its surface etched with symbols that glowed faintly. It rotated toward me and projected a beam of light across my face. "Scanning," it chirped in a flat tone. The armored women around me stiffened. After a moment, the drone announced, "Subject identified. Potential genetic study specimen." There was a pause. Then it continued. Translation: "Most desirable mate in 400 cycles." Silence. Absolute silence. Then every single armored head snapped toward me at once. The pressure of the spear at my throat vanished as the warrior, holding it, straightened abruptly. Around me, I heard a synchronized intake of breath so dramatic it could have been rehearsed. The tall one in front of me slowly removed her helmet. I have no words that adequately describe what was under that helmet. Sharp cheekbones, silver-toned skin that shimmered faintly in the morning light, eyes like molten gold, and hair braided back in intricate warrior patterns. She looked like someone had asked the universe to design a supermodel crossed with a gladiator. And she was staring at me like I was the last slice of pizza in existence. "You are the prophesied one," she said. "I work in IT," I replied automatically. The floating drone rotated again. "Subject declares, he commands invisible networks of great power." A murmur rippled through the group. "That's not," I started. "He speaks humbly of his dominance," another warrior whispered. "Dominance?" I hadn't dominated anything since middle school dodgeball. Before I could object further, 2 of them gently but very firmly lifted me off the ground. Not roughly. More like I was a fragile artifact that might shatter if handled incorrectly. "I can walk," I protested. The drone beeped. "He insists on demonstrating physical independence." "That is unnecessary," the golden-eyed warrior said. "You are precious." Precious. I had never been described as precious in my life. Slightly disappointing? Yes. Mildly competent? Occasionally. But precious? They carried me through the forest like I was some kind of sacred woodland prize. My tent, my cooler, my dignity, all abandoned. As we reached a clearing, I saw it. Their camp wasn't a camp. It was a settlement. Sleek metallic structures curved upward like organic sculptures, glowing lines running along their surfaces. Banners hung between tall poles, marked with symbols that looked both elegant and terrifying. Every female in the settlement stopped what she was doing when they saw me. Tools lowered. Conversations ceased. One of the warriors carrying me spoke loudly. "The rare lone male of the sky has been found." The clearing erupted into stunned whispers. I was placed carefully onto a raised platform covered in layered fabrics that shimmered like liquid silk. Someone adjusted my posture. Another brushed dirt off my sleeve with intense concentration. "I'm not rare." I tried again. "There are billions of us." The drone floated closer. Correction, billions of sky males confirmed. The entire tribe froze. The golden-eyed warrior turned slowly toward the drone. "Repeat." "Billions," It chirped cheerfully. A long pause followed. Then the drone added, "However, this is the only specimen currently present." The tension snapped back instantly.
Ah,
Context. Very important. A different warrior stepped forward, removing her helmet. She had darker skin with faint bioluminescent markings tracing her temples. Her eyes were sharp, calculating. "I was the first to detect his descent from the canopy," she declared. "I was the first to secure him," another countered. "You would have pierced his throat," the first snapped. "You hesitated." Golden Eyes raised a hand, and the argument ceased immediately. "The law is clear," she said. "The discoverer of a rare lone male gains first bonding rights. Through bonding comes political ascension."
bonding.
Political ascension. I raised my hand slowly, like I was back in a team meeting. What exactly does bonding involve? The drone word. Bonding, ceremonial pairing, ritual signifying alliance, reproduction eligibility, and leadership claim. My stomach dropped. "I would like to formally decline," I said. "He is overwhelmed by our devotion," someone murmured. "He fears choosing among us," another added. Golden Eyes stepped closer, towering over me even without the helmet. She studied my face like I was an ancient artifact. "You will not be harmed," she said. "But you must choose wisely. For whichever of us claims you becomes High Matriarch." Around us, the tension thickened. Rivalries flickered in glances. Hands tightened around spear shafts. I swallowed. "I literally just fix routers," I said weakly. The drone translated with solemn reverence. "He stabilizes vast communication infrastructures." A collective murmur of admiration rippled outward. Somewhere in the settlement, a horn-like instrument sounded. Golden Eyes turned toward the sound, then back to me. "The Tournament of Turns will begin at dusk." My brain stalled. "The what?" "To determine who earns the right to bond with you." Several warriors straightened, anticipation radiating from them like heat. I looked at the sky. I had gone camping to avoid my inbox. Now I was apparently the grand prize in an intergalactic gladiator dating competition. And somehow, explaining deodorant and pizza to armored alien Amazons felt like it might be the least of my problems. I had barely processed being the prophesied rare lone male of the sky when they escorted me to what they called the arena. I say arena, but it looked more like an impossibly large amphitheater carved into the side of a crystal-laced hill, with energy banners shimmering along its edges and a crowd of warriors already gathering. From my perch on a raised dais, I felt less like a person and more like a particularly confused museum exhibit, or maybe the centerpiece at a very aggressive intergalactic fashion show. The golden-eyed warrior, clearly the leader, gestured to the center of the arena. The Tournament of Turns begins. Each contender will demonstrate skill, strength, and suitability to bond with the rare male. Her voice carried authority, and the word bond made me instinctively glance down at my shoes. Suitability? Skill? I didn't even know the first thing about, well, anything that would impress an alien tribe. The first combatant stepped forward. She was a towering figure, her armor glinting in the sun, and she wielded a staff that hummed with energy. I instinctively flinched. She glanced at me and gave a polite nod. Somewhere, a drumbeat picked up, low and urgent. I assumed this was normal in alien tournaments, though my internal logic strongly suggested it was not. They began circling each other. Sparks flew. Energy shields blinked and hummed. I clutched the edge of my dais nervously. I had been warned the tournament would be a spectacle, but I was unprepared for the combination of elegance, brute force, and theatrical screaming. One warrior flipped gracefully through the air and landed inches from another's spear. I instinctively waved. The arena froze. The drone beeped. Gesture interpreted as blessing. Subject approves of combat proficiency. The crowd gasped. I waved again, more emphatically. "I am very impressed," I said. My words were translated instantly, and the warriors looked at me as though I had just uttered some sacred incantation. I shrugged. Somehow, I was now a referee, and apparently a very spiritual one. Between rounds, I was studied like a rare artifact. Warriors approached cautiously, asking questions. Explain Earth courtship ritual, one demanded. I tried my best to keep it simple. Well, we often go on dinner dates or we might text each other a lot. Sometimes we watch movies together. It's complicated, honestly. The translation drone emitted a series of approving chirps. The warriors nodded gravely, taking notes in glowing tablets that floated beside them. Another approached, curious, and asked about hygiene. I hesitated. Deodorant, I said slowly. It's important before social interaction. The warrior tilted her head. Explain. I gestured awkwardly. It masks natural scent. It's polite, kind of like a protective cloak. She blinked slowly, then leaned forward, inspecting me as though I had revealed some sacred secret. Notes were taken. I was officially a living lecture on human biology and customs. The competition intensified. Each warrior wanted a turn to prove herself worthy. They sparred, performed acrobatic feats, and demonstrated strange rituals that combined martial skill with what looked like dance. I sat, trying to act dignified, which was difficult when one warrior leapt so close to me that I could see the determined glitter in her eyes. She made a gesture that I instinctively interpreted as a wink. The drone translated it as, "She pledges allegiance to your influence." I nearly choked on my own confusion. Somewhere between a backflip and a high-speed dodge, one of the warriors accidentally collided with the dais. I jumped up reflexively, trying to steady myself, but in their culture, this apparently looked like active participation. The crowd erupted into cheers, interpreting my panic as deliberate guidance. I waved, bowing awkwardly, and the drone announced, "The rare male expresses approval." I considered hiding under my chair, but the warriors frowned. It was not an option. The stoic golden-eyed warrior approached me during a break. She didn't ask questions. She just studied me. I tried to meet her gaze, offering a nervous smile. Her eyes softened ever so slightly. Somehow, amidst the chaos, I felt that maybe I wasn't entirely a sacred object in her eyes. Maybe I was human. One of the rival commanders, darker-skinned with glowing facial markings, was clearly plotting strategy. She leaned toward another warrior, whispering urgently. I couldn't understand what they were saying, but the drone translated snippets. He must choose wisely. We cannot falter. His approval is essential. I swallowed. I hadn't even had breakfast yet. The next round was particularly intense. Two warriors launched themselves in synchronized motion, weapons clashing, sparks flying. I waved again instinctively, shouting, "Excellent coordination." The crowd roared. Apparently, my praise was a sacred act of validation. My hands were shaking. I was not a public speaker, let alone a ceremonial referee of interstellar combat. Yet somehow, my awkward enthusiasm elevated the spectacle. By mid-tournament, I had learned the key principle: maintain calm, nod frequently, and respond to every glance as if it carried cosmic importance. Somehow, I managed to avoid being impaled, crushed, or accidentally deified. Between rounds, the golden-eyed warrior leaned closer. Her voice, translated in soft tones, said, "You are unlike the others. You do not fear." I blinked. I had fear. Plenty of it. But somehow, they interpreted my stunned silence as measured courage. The scientist priestess, the one who had been quietly observing, asked a question about human humor. I explained sarcasm, demonstrating a few self-deprecating jokes about my own clumsiness. She tilted her head, intrigued. She repeated the joke to another warrior, who laughed in that throaty, alien way. I realized I had just successfully introduced the concept of comedy to a tribe that had never known it. My words were apparently as powerful as my presence. By the final round of the day, the competitors had become more cautious, more respectful, and oddly more competitive in a way that seemed less lethal and more performative. Each wanted to impress me, not just physically, but intellectually, emotionally. I sat there exhausted, realizing that I had become the centerpiece of not just a tournament, but a cultural exchange of unprecedented scale. The day ended with the warriors bowing to me collectively, their energy weapons dimming as ceremonial lights flared. I slumped on the dais, wiped my brow, and muttered, "I just wanted a weekend in the woods." The drone chirped solemnly. Rare male demonstrates humility. Tribe records this as highest virtue. Somewhere amidst the ritual, I noticed the scientist priestess watching me closely, her expression unreadable but softening with each passing moment. I realized that while the other warriors were vying for status, she was genuinely curious about me, my thoughts, my culture, my quirks. And maybe, just maybe, she was starting to care about the human behind the rare lone male prophecy. And that, I thought, was the only thing keeping me from completely losing my mind in a forest full of 8-foot-tall alien women who had decided I was the ultimate prize. By the next morning, I had convinced myself that surviving the Tournament of Turns was both a miracle and a matter of pure luck. I had nodded, waved, laughed, and offered awkward commentary on alien martial arts, somehow earning the tribe's approval without ever actually participating in combat. I thought I might finally have a moment to breathe, to contemplate how I had gone from a quiet camping trip to the centerpiece of an alien political spectacle.
But the calm was short-lived.
The scientist priestess approached me before sunrise, her bioluminescent markings pulsing softly in the dim light. She looked unusually serious, her golden eyes narrowing at the hovering translation drone. "We must review the prophecy text again," she said. She tapped a sequence on the device, and the AI's holographic interface flickered. Symbols rearranged themselves, and a faint mechanical hum filled the air. I leaned back cautiously, sensing that nothing good would come from this. The drone beeped, scanning and translating the text aloud. Original translation: potential genetic study subject.
A pause.
Then it continued. Current belief: most desirable mate in 400 cycles. The scientist priestess frowned. This cannot be correct. Humans are common, plentiful. You are not rare.
My heart sank.
Wait, what? I'm not rare? Are you telling them that this whole thing is a misunderstanding? Yes, she said, and there was a hint of amusement in her tone. We need to confirm your species population and distribution before proceeding further. She tapped the drone again. A holographic projection appeared above it, showing Earth from space, glowing cities, sprawling continents, and clouds of data points representing billions of human males. The entire tribe froze. Every head turned toward the projection, eyes widening in unison. The golden-eyed war chief stepped forward, her posture rigid. "There are billions?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. How can this be?" "Yes," I muttered. Feeling the absurdity of the situation hit me all at once. "There are billions. I'm just one of many. We're everywhere. There's a lot of us." I waved vaguely at the sky, trying to convey scale. Somehow, this only seemed to make the situation more dramatic. A murmur spread through the crowd like wildfire. Rival commanders began whispering to each other, and the energy in the air shifted from competitive anticipation to existential confusion. One warrior even collapsed into a crouch, muttering about the collapse of their carefully calculated political strategies. The very foundation of their prophecy had been shaken. I sat down heavily on my dais, feeling both relief and a strange kind of amusement. "So, let me get this straight," I said. "You all went through this elaborate tournament, risking arm strength, dignity, and possibly honor codes, all for me? And I'm basically a regular guy." The drone floated closer, emitting a soft series of chirps. Subject conveys humility. Tribe registers anomaly in previous assumptions. The golden-eyed war chief's expression was unreadable for a moment, then softened into something between incredulity and wonder. "This changes everything," she said slowly. The shift was instantaneous. The warriors no longer approached me with competitive intent. Their gazes lingered curiously, less with desire and more with cautious respect. One of the rival commanders muttered to another, perhaps the prophecy misjudged them. But humans are persistent, unpredictable, and remarkably resilient. And that, I realized, was when the HFY moment hit. Despite being common, Despite being technically insignificant in their prophecy, humanity's sheer adaptability, ingenuity, and chaos made me more interesting than any sacred title could. I wasn't rare, but I was defective, resourceful, unpredictable, and apparently, that mattered more than the tribe had anticipated. The scientist priestess approached me quietly, separate from the others. She tilted her head, studying me closely. You are unlike what we expected. You do not wield power or authority in the traditional sense, yet you influence everything around you, without effort. I blinked. I influence things? I mostly fix computers and get lost in the woods. She smiled faintly, and there was warmth in her voice. That is what makes you captivating. You are ordinary, yet extraordinary in your unpredictability. You are human. Somewhere, my brain processed that she had just complimented me in the middle of an alien civilization on the edge of existential chaos. Somewhere else, I wondered how badly I was going to get lost trying to get back to my campsite. But for the first time since waking up in that forest, I felt a strange surge of confidence. I was no longer a passive artifact of prophecy. I was a person, and they were genuinely interested in me, not as a prize, but as an individual. The war chief gathered the warriors, who were still murmuring in confusion and disbelief. The prophecy was flawed, she announced. The rare male is not unique. Yet his species demonstrates qualities that we did not anticipate. Adaptability, humor, resilience. He teaches us that rarity does not equate to value. I sat there slack-jawed, unsure whether to feel heroic or just confused. Somewhere behind me, the scientist priestess's expression softened further. You have changed our perspective, she said quietly. Not through power, not through domination, but by being yourself. And just like that, the political competition evaporated. The tribal rivalries, the scheming, the ceremonial duels, all of it suddenly seemed trivial. They didn't need to fight over me anymore. They simply wanted to understand, to learn, to connect. For a brief moment, everything was peaceful. I caught the scientist priestess's eye, and there was a spark of mutual understanding. A subtle, slow-building recognition that amidst the chaos, a bond could form based on choice, curiosity, and genuine interest rather than prophecy and politics. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. The tournament had been absurd, the ritualistic combat ridiculous, and the stakes, well, they had been far higher than they should have been. Yet here I was, surrounded by a tribe of formidable, awe-inspiring warriors, no longer as a prize, but as an individual whose quirks and ordinariness had turned the prophecy upside down. The day ended with the tribe dispersing to reconsider their rules and traditions. I sat on my platform, exhausted, thinking about how surreal it was to be the accidental catalyst for cultural introspection in an alien civilization. And through it all, the scientist priestess lingered nearby, quietly observing me, smiling faintly, and perhaps, just perhaps, beginning to care not because I was rare, but because I was human. And in that moment, I realized something incredible. Sometimes, being ordinary was more powerful than any prophecy could ever promise. The next morning, the settlement felt strangely quiet. The energy that had crackled through the air during the Tournament of Turns was gone, replaced by an unusual stillness, like the calm after a storm. I sat on the dais, legs dangling, and tried to process everything that had happened. 4 days, I had been the epicenter of political tension, ritual combat, and what I could only describe as extreme interstellar fanfare. Now, with the prophecy exposed as flawed and my rare status debunked, it felt like someone had hit pause on a very complicated video game I hadn't agreed to play. The golden-eyed war chief approached, her armor gleaming in the morning sun, but her posture was relaxed. The laws of bonding have been reconsidered, she announced. No longer will leadership be granted through possession of the rare male. Choice, not destiny, shall guide our unions. I blinked. That was surprisingly sensible for a species that had just spent several days performing acrobatic combat over me. A murmur spread through the gathered warriors. Rival commanders looked at each other, confusion mixed with relief, while others quietly nodded, adjusting to the idea that political power was no longer tied to me. Somewhere deep inside, I felt a swell of satisfaction. Not for myself, but because the chaos I had inadvertently caused had forced a cultural reform. Somehow, without lifting a finger or demonstrating combat prowess, a regular human had changed the laws of an alien society. That had to count as a minor miracle. The scientist priestess approached next. She moved with the grace of someone accustomed to precision and deliberation, yet there was an unspoken warmth in her movements. She studied me carefully, her golden eyes flicking to the floating drone, which hovered silently, documenting everything. "You have proven that your species' strength does not lie in rarity or dominance," she said softly. "Yet influence comes naturally to you, through presence, humor, and resilience. I am intrigued." I felt a blush rise uncomfortably on my cheeks. Intrigued? She meant me, personally. Not because of prophecy, not because of tournaments, but because of me. Somehow, surviving the tournament, explaining deodorant, discussing pizza, and enduring endless ceremonial scrutiny had led to this moment. I tried to grin, awkwardly. "I guess I'm good at accidental diplomacy," I said. She tilted her head slightly, a gesture that somehow made her expression warmer, almost teasing. We walked together away from the dais, past rows of curious warriors who were still adjusting to the new rules. The settlement itself felt different now, less tense, more open. Alien architecture that had once seemed imposing now seemed elegant in its combination of organic shapes and shimmering energy. I glanced around, taking in the crystal-laced paths and the floating banners, marveling at the sheer scale of it all. Somehow, it had all become homelike in a strange, incomprehensible way. "So," she said finally, her voice low and thoughtful, "what will you do when you return to your world of billions? Will you forget us?" The question caught me off guard. I paused, considering. I had thought about going home every day, about logging back into my mundane life, returning to email, to instant messages, to the unremarkable routine that had seemed so oppressive before. But now, I wasn't sure I wanted to forget. "This is the first time anyone has ever fought over me," I admitted, with a faint smirk. "Not literally, of course, but emotionally, politically, ceremonially. I don't think I could just walk away and forget." She smiled at that, faint but genuine, a slow curve of satisfaction that seemed to glow even in the morning light. Her gaze softened, and for a brief moment, it felt like the air itself held its breath. "Then perhaps you'll stay, if only for a time. Learn our ways, share yours. Not as a prize, but as a participant in our lives." The simplicity of it was almost absurd, given all that had preceded it. I swallowed hard, realizing I could, if I wanted, step into this strange, alien society and become part of it. Not because of prophecy, not because I was rare, but simply because I was human. The other warriors gradually gathered around, their curiosity now tempered by the new order. They no longer argued over turns or status, instead observing us quietly, as if granting space to something important, an organic connection that required no ceremony, no competition, no prophecy. I realized that the tribe's respect had shifted from seeing me as an artifact to recognizing me as a person, capable of choice, humor, and subtle influence. Somewhere deep in the background, the drone floated silently, capturing the scene. I looked at it and muttered, "You'll need to adjust your translation settings." It chirped a happy series of beeps. Apparently, that counted as humor. As the day drew on, we wandered through the settlement together, exchanging stories about Earth and the forest, sharing details of alien rituals, and discovering how little we had in common and how much that actually mattered. Every glance, every careful step, every shared joke or observation strengthened a bond that had nothing to do with prophecy and everything to do with understanding. Finally, she turned to me, eyes sparkling with a faint glow. "Will you teach me about your world?" she asked. "About your culture, your food, your humor?" I laughed. "I guess I could start with pizza." She tilted her head, intrigued. "Pizza?" I nodded. "Trust me, it's sacred. And it's delicious. If you want to understand humans, You'll need to experience it firsthand. She smiled fully now, the bioluminescent markings on her temples pulsing faintly in rhythm with her excitement. Somehow, it felt like an invitation and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of something neither of us had anticipated. As we stood there, the Alien Council's newly revised laws floating in subtle holographic banners above us, I realized how absurdly fortunate I was. I had gone camping to escape emails and routines. I had woken up to find myself at the center of a civilization's political prophecy. I had survived combat tournaments, explained deodorant, debated pizza, and somehow changed a society without ever intending to. And now, standing beside someone who genuinely wanted to know me, I understood that the journey wasn't about rarity, it was about connection. Somewhere behind me, the settlement buzzed quietly with new beginnings. And somewhere within me, I felt a sense of calm that had nothing to do with prophecy, tournaments, or alien politics. I was just a human, in a forest on an alien world, laughing softly at the absurdity of it all, and realizing that sometimes being ordinary was exactly the kind of extraordinary anyone could hope for. And maybe, just maybe, the next slice of pizza would taste even better under alien skies.